At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. In the end, what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it this way. My name's I Am Duck. Let's begin. High strategist Vanox of the Vitic Ascendancy stood on the flagship Oathkeeper's bridge, his forearms locked behind his carapace to still their tremor. Before him, the grand holotank showed the Prixis system, his home, a jewel of cosmic order. A tide of amorphous crimson crept in from the periphery, a stain labeled simply Devourer. One by one, the neat, orderly icons of the third defensive cordon. Ships crewed by warriors he trained, souls bound by honor, winked from existence as the tide consumed them. The Oathkeeper's bridge became a tomb of rigid composure. Every Vitic officer performed their duties with the flawless discipline drilled into them since hatching, their faces impassive plates of stoic resignation. The air hummed with the three-toned chordal structures of their formal battle language, a stark contrast to the grating quiet of the star-dusted blackness. A beautiful sound, Vanox thought, a bitter taste on his palate. He witnessed the most honorable, orderly, and useless death of his life. "Report," Vanox commanded, his voice a dry scrape, the sound of sand on old bone. His second command, sub-strategist Hallex, turned from his console. Hallex's vocal ridges trembled, the only sign of his grief. "The third cordon is gone, High Strategist. We've lost almost the entire fleet. The Devourer Swirl maintains its velocity. At its current speed, it will reach Prixis Prime's orbital sphere in 3 months. 3 rotations, 72 standard hours, an insufficient amount of time to evacuate a moon, let alone a capital world of 12 billion souls. His bonded, his broodkin lived there. The thought stole the air from his lungs. The deck seemed to tilt. Every strategy, every honorable doctrine, every perfectly executed maneuver from the Concorde's famed battle archives failed. They met a force of nature with the rules of a duel, and the hurricane ignored the etiquette. Vanox's mind flashed back, unbidden, to the forbidden archives, to the dust-choked data spore he accessed under the highest security clearance. A text so heretical, its study was punishable by dissolution. The Umbral Swarm Contingency, a series of simulations run a millennium ago by their panicked ancestors after the War of Unfettered Ideologies. In every simulation against a theoretical, consumptive entity, all ordered strategies produced total civilization failure. All but one. The one simulation that produced a sliver of a survival outcome, a terrifying, statistically insignificant chance. It hinged on a variable so volatile, so unpredictable, they locked it away behind a dimensional schism and threw away the key. A variable classified as the ultimate threat to their great quieting, their 1,000-year peace built on the ashes of chaotic innovation. A Class Omega chaotic actor. Humanity. Hallex watched him, the sensitive membranes of his eyes dilating, waiting for the final honorable order, the command to die well, to sell their lives dearly in a last, pointless gesture. The weight of 1,000 years of tradition settled on Vanox's shoulders. He could give the order. He could die a hero, his name etched into the grand cenotaphs, a model of Vitic virtue, and his world would be eaten. Or he could commit the greatest sacrilege in the galactic Concorde's history. His voice tore from his throat, heavy with the weight of a damned soul, as Vanox gave the order, "Helm, bring us about. Communications, access the forbidden archives. Authorization, Vanox Omega 39. Prepare the energy surge to stabilize the quarantine gate, and transmit the old words on all frequencies." Hallex flinched back, his vocal ridges clicking in alarm. "High Strategist, you can't. The gates requires the soul psi transmitter to be active. Millennia could have seen it dismantled. It could be dust in the great dark." "Then our prayer will be short," Vanox said, the words hollow and final. "We can allow trust they were too busy fighting each other to notice a forgotten probe in their Oort cloud." He turned to face the main view screen, which showed the silent, implacable advance of the Devourers. Do it. With all options exhausted, we make the final call to the galaxy's most dangerous species, to humans. The signal was less a message, and more a raw primal scream of data packaged in a 1,000-year-old transmission standard. It tore across the galaxy and slammed into the dormant Concord transmitter probe, adrift in the cold, dark expanse of the Sol System's Oort cloud. The probe, forgotten for centuries, shattered to life. It drew power from zero-point energy and rebroadcast the signal inward. A system-wide shockwave instead of a polite hail. The signal found no unified government. Humanity outgrew such quaint notions centuries ago. In a sterile zero-gravity boardroom orbiting Mars, the signal flashed across the Martian corporate hegemony's main screen. Before the last data packet resolved, a dozen corporate AIs ran predictive models, calculated potential profit margins on galactic warfare, drafted mercenary contracts, and estimated the market value of xenocidal plague salvage. The CEO, a woman whose body was more chrome than carbon, simply said, "Authorize exploratory asset deployment, Clause 9, hostile acquisition mandate." Deep in Jupiter's churning clouds, the Jovian scrapper clans picked it up on a comms array, welded from the husks of 3 different colony ships. To them, the data stream of a galaxy-ending swarm was a blueprint for the greatest salvage field in history. Their grizzled clan matriarch spat a stream of tobacco juice against a bulkhead and bellowed into the ship-wide calm. "Fire up the big claws, boys and girls! The universe just opened up a scrapyard, and we're claiming first dibs." On a dying Earth in a bunker beneath the irradiated ruins of Geneva, the last council of the North American Federation saw it as a threat. Then after a moment, where the only sound was the ragged breathing of old men, they saw it as a desperate final chance to matter again. Aboard a repurposed ore hauler named the Last Argument in the asteroid belt, Captain Kerr Madsen of the Charon Group Mercenary Company played poker with his first mate. The alert klaxon blared through the smoky air. Madsen kept his eyes on his cards. "If that's another Martian tax audit, vent the comms, officer. I'm bluffing here." His comms officer's voice, tiny and laced with static, crackled over the ship's internal systems. "Oh, Captain, you're going to want to see this. It's from outside the neighborhood." Madsen sighed, threw down a winning hand, and swaggered to the bridge. The main screen showed the message, a desperate plea for help, a terrifying profile of an all-consuming enemy, and galactic coordinates leading to a new wormhole on the system's edge, to a species that spent 1,000 years fighting over a single solar system scraps, locked in a cage with only themselves. It was a prayer. It was an invitation to the biggest bar fight in galactic history, and Madsen's crew, being hardened belts mercenaries, just happened to be closest to the door. Near the besieged world of Praxis Prime, the fabric of space-time groaned and tore open, a wound in reality, its edges wavering like heat haze, stabilized into a perfect circle, the quarantine gate. Dormant for a millennium, now ablaze with light. The Concord fleet's remnants, a pathetic collection of scarred cruisers and destroyers, held a respectful, disciplined distance. They held their collective breath, expecting a savior, a disciplined armada perhaps. What they got was one ship. A clunky, asymmetrical vessel tumbled out of the gate with a distinct lack of grace. Its running lights flickering. It looked less like a starship and more like a small asteroid someone hollowed out before bolting engines to its backside. This was Madsen's last argument. A handful of smaller, equally ugly corvettes and gunships, the Charon Group, followed it. They were a scouting party far from an army. Vanox watched from the Oathkeeper's bridge, his vocal ridges clenched. This was it. This pathetic flotilla was the galaxy's most dangerous species. His spirit sank. He had damned his soul for a band of pirates. Then the human comms channel opened, and the noise that flooded his bridge was a physical assault. Instead of the layered caudal speech of the Vitic, a sharp, percussive static of different languages, tones, and attitudes scraped against his auditory receptors. "Charon lead to all belt frequencies," a rough voice crackled. "We hit the jackpot, boys. Coordinates are good, gate is open, and there's a welcome wagon of very shiny, very scared-looking Xenos waiting for us. Looks like the booze is on the house and the bar is on fire." A different voice cut in, laughing. "Oh, you see the size of that lead alien ship? I bet the scrap from one of its toilets is worth more than a whole damn ship." Vanox felt a certainty colder than deep space settle in his gut. He realized his error. He hadn't summoned a savior. He unleashed a competing apocalypse. The rough voice from the last argument cut through the noise with the authority of a thrown knife. "This is Madsen of the Charon Group. We're first through the door. We'll take the contract. Now, who's in charge of the clusterfuck? And how much are you paying?" Before Vanox could respond to the barbaric greeting, the real flood began. Madsen's broadcast, a mix of gleeful discovery and mercenary recruitment, was the starting point. Through the gate poured the second wave. A sleek black warship of the Martian corporate hegemony slid through, its lines a collection of acute intersecting planes. It ignored the Concorde fleet and ran active scans on the Devourer swarm, its comms officer coolly broadcasting. "Martian vessel Edison's Wrath is now in system. All salvage claims are subject to hegemony commercial arbitration, effective immediately." Madsen's voice snarled back instantly. "Negative, Wrath. This is a designated Charon Group operational theater by right of first contract. Your arbitration can file a complaint with my ship's plasma vents. Back off." Then came the rest. The hulking corrosion-streaked haulers of the Jovian scrapper clans, colony arcs bristling with bolted-on railguns, swarms of tiny garage-built fighters. Forget an organized relief force. This was a chaotic migration, a gold rush drawn by riches and a good fight, arriving in waves as the news spread and the distance was crossed. Vanox was horrified. These were wolves, a far cry from allies, arriving one by one to a fresh kill, already fighting over the best pieces. By every conceivable Concorde metric, the emergency holographic conference failed catastrophically. Vanox stood stiffly on his bridge, flanked by the projected images of his Concorde peers. Nyala and Orvathi diplomat, whose serene, feathery form seemed to ripple with distaste, stood on one side. Tecton, a stoic Petran engineer whose mineral body was a slow-moving glacier of thought, radiated silent disapproval on the other. The third hologram, Captain Kier Madsen, was an insult to the very concept of a formal meeting. He leaned back in a battered command chair, one scarred boot propped on his console. He looked unimpressed, bored even, as if being solicited to save a galactic civilization was an inconvenient interruption to his afternoon nap. Vanox attempted to begin, his voice formal. "Captain Madsen, on behalf of the Galactic Concorde, I thank you for answering our call. We must integrate your forces into our command structure. Discipline and adherence to established procedures are our strategy's cornerstones." Madsen cut him off with a short, sharp laugh that sounded like grinding metal. "Procedures? Listen, Forearms, your procedures got you a front row seat at the end of the world. You're not buying an army, you're hiring an apocalypse, and apocalypses don't do paperwork." He leaned forward, the hologram flickered slightly, a predatory grin spreading across his face. "So here are our terms. Simple. So you pencil pushers can keep up. Payment is unrestricted salvage rights to all enemy, and let's be honest, friendly wreckage on the battlefield. We get full tactical autonomy. You point us at the big, hungry space monster. You wire our holding company on Mars a sizable deposit. And then you stay the hell out of our way. You got a problem with that? We can turn around right now and sell tickets to your extinction." Tecton, the Petran engineer, vibrated with indignation, the light catching his sharp plates in angry glints. He sent a private comm pulse to Vanox. "This is an unacceptable risk, strategist. Unrestricted salvage. They will have our shield frequencies, our reactor designs, our fleet's core schematics. They will reverse engineer our entire military infrastructure within a single rotation." Vanox's reply was a grim pulse of pragmatic instruction. A future where they have our technology is preferable to a future where we are cosmic dust. Accept the terms. Madsen seemed to sense the tense, silent exchange and just kept grinning. He knew exactly what he asked. He offered more than a fight. He offered to loot their civilization in the process. Before the Concord could offer a formal, multi-claused, committee-approved surrender to his terms, the universe accelerated the negotiation process. An alarm blared across the Oathkeeper's bridge. "High strategist," Hallex shouted. "Devourer Vanguard. Alerted by the Gates energy signature. They're on an intercept course." A millennium of doctrine reasserted itself. "All Concord vessels," Vanox commanded, his voice ringing with authority. "A line in a Gamma Epsilon shield wall. Hold the line." The Vitic ships moved with the grace of a choreographed dance. They slid into positions, their shields overlapping to form a perfect interlocking wall of radiant blue energy. It was tactically sound. It was doctrinally pure. It was beautiful. The Devourers began to dissolve it like acid through parchment. The Vanguard, a collection of smaller, faster bioships, slammed into the shield wall. They fired no weapons. They were the weapons. Their bodies corroded the energy fields, their mass overwhelming the emitters. Vanox watched in horror as the shield display on the lead cruiser bled from blue to critical red. He prepared to order a fighting retreat, to sacrifice the outer line to save the core. Then Madsen's voice, calm and utterly devoid of panic, cut through the command channel. He skipped permission and issued a declaration. "All Charon fleet assets. Execute Plan B9. And for the record, that's B for brute force. Get it done." Without waiting for Concord orders, without any regard for the perfect arrangement that disrupted, the chaotic, ugly, beautiful human armada charged forward with jerky, unpredictable thrusts that defied all models of fuel-conserving movement. Vanox watched in utter soul-crushing disbelief. Madsen's first command bypassed his warships, going straight to his largest, slowest civilian freighters. The ones with the faded flags of dead nations painted on their hulls. "Haulers 1 through 12, Madsen's voice cracked. "You're weapons free, full burn, ramming solution." These were haulers, crewed by volunteers, madmen, and patriots, born 1,000 years too late. On the Concord command channel, Nyala the Orvathi diplomat shrieked. "This is madness, a suicidal waste of life and resources. You must stop." A human pilot's voice came back, laced with a strange, cheerful gallows humor that Vanox failed to comprehend. "Hey, lady, tell my ex-wife I'm using the ship she took in the divorce to save the galaxy. She'll hate that." The 12 freighters accelerated, their engines glowing white-hot as they pushed past safety limits. They were lumbering, clumsy battering rams aimed at the heart of the Devourer Vanguard. Madsen's voice came over a private channel to Vanox, calm as a summer breeze. "They're delivering the payload, strategist." Vanox understood. Madsen's mercenaries arrived unprepared for a conventional war. They arrived armed for any and all contingencies. And contingency number 1, apparently, was turning their own supply line into a wave of suicide bombs, welded into the freighter's cargo bays. Vanox's battle console suddenly identified repurposed asteroid-cracking shaped nuclear charges. The impacts were titanic. Silent, brilliant flashes of light bloomed in the black, outshining the distant star. 12 suns born and died in an instant, obliterating the lead Devourer bioships. The remaining Vanguard, a force of nature that had never before encountered an enemy willing to weaponize its own logistics with such joyful, nihilistic abandon, shattered. It reeled back, confused and damaged. Instead of a simple retreat, however, a few surviving bioships moved with an unsettling deliberation. They tracked to beam chunks of their own destroyed brethren, pulling the wreckage in before retreating into the main swarm. Vanox flagged it on his console, a strange, possibly reflexive biological imperative. In the immediate aftermath, a fragile, debris-strewn calm descended. Vanox expected the humans to regroup, tend to their wounded, and mourn their dead in whatever barbaric fashion was their custom. Instead, he watched in a state of profound, deepening horror as dozens of smaller human ships, the scrappers and the freelancers, swarmed the fresh battlefield like jackals on a lion's kill. They latched onto the smoking, drifting husks of the vaporized Devourer ships and to his utter soul-shaking shock. The wreckage of the Concorde vessels damaged in the initial assault. Even the twisted, molten remains of the sacrificed human freighters found a new purpose. Tractor beams, raw and powerful, tore out sheets of alien armor plating. Robotic drone arms ripped out glowing power conduits and intact weapon systems. It was a feeding frenzy. "They are scavengers," sub-strategist Helix spat, his vocal ridges vibrating with disgust. "They desecrate the fallen. This is without honor." But Vanox saw something else. Through a tactical zoom, he watched a heavily damaged human cruiser, smoke pouring from a dozen hull breaches, undergo repair in real time. A slab of armor plate, clearly of Vitic design, was welded over a gaping hole in its side. He saw a weapon pod from a crippled Petron destroyer, crudely but effectively jury-rigged into a tiny human corvette's weapon hardpoint. This was logistics, a far cry from desecration. This was their supply chain. They rearmed, refueled, and repaired themselves using the battlefield as their depot. Madsen's insane demand for unrestricted salvage rights profit was secondary. This was the core of his entire strategy for a sustained, unconventional war. They had no need to build. They only needed to take. The formal debriefing hologram was thick with a silence colder than the space between galaxies. The Orvathi representative Nyala, her feathery form now bristling with indisguised fury, presented the casualty report. "Your strategy, Captain Madsen, sacrificed 12 vessels and over 4,000 souls. 4,000? For tactical retreat of a minor vanguard?" Vanox, though still shaken by the barbarity, found himself in the bizarre position of defending it. A taste like ash filled his mouth. "Representative, the enemy broke. Its advance halted for the first time." Madsen's hologram flickered to life. He stood away from his command chair in what looked like a personal workshop. He disassembled a large, brutal-looking projectile weapon piece by piece, wiping each component clean with an oiled cloth before setting it down. He kept his attention on the weapon. "You're adding up the cost of the bullets," Madsen said, his voice flat as he racked the weapon's slide with a loud, definitive clack. "I'm just looking at the body on the floor. It's dead. We won. Move on." The hologram vanished, leaving the Concorde representatives in stunned, furious silence. The war bled from orbit onto the surface of Cora, a vital agro-world whose golden grain fed 3 star systems, a massive devourer ground swarm, a chittering tide of bioengineered death overwhelmed the planetary defense forces. The message from the surface was simple and desperate. Hold the Gorgon Pass or the planetary capital and its spaceport would fall. Sergeant Mateo Alvarez and his company of Colonial Marines, call sign Junkyard Dogs, hot dropped from orbit. Their mission was simple, if suicidal. Reinforce the last legion of Vitic immortals at the pass and hold the line until Madsen's fleet could punch a hole in the orbital blockade. When the Junkyard Dogs drop pod slammed into the rocky terrain behind the Vitic lines, they found a scene of perfect, honorable slaughter. The Gorgon Pass was a wide, rocky canyon, and the Vitic formed their lines at its narrowest point. They were magnificent. 4-armed, 8-foot-tall warriors encased in burnished power armor stood in an immaculate phalanx. Their heavy tower shields interlocked, a glittering wall of metallic scales, their plasma glaives humming with contained energy, rose and fell in perfect synchronized rhythm, scything through waves of skittering, claw-devourer organisms. They were an unbreakable line. They were also dying, slowly, honorably, and uselessly. They were a dam of proud stone eroded by an acid tide that simply lacked any appreciation for honor, courage, or a perfectly maintained shield wall. The Vitic Legion commander, a giant of his species with intricate honor markings etched onto his helmet, strode over to Alvarez. His voice boomed through his helmet's external speaker. "Human Sergeant, a fine way to die. Our left flank weakens. We will plug the gap with your soldiers. Stand with us in the line." Alvarez wiped alien gore from his faceplate, looked at the orderly battle, then looked up at the chaotic rock-strewn cliffs and ravines flanking the pass. He tapped his helmet side, activating his squad comm. "Yeah, we're not doing that." Ignoring the Legion commander's furious, sputtering shouts, Alvarez barked orders to his platoon sergeants. "All right, junkyard dogs, listen up. We're not playing tin soldiers. We're going dancing. Squads Alpha and Bravo, you're with me. Up the guts, find some cover, and make a mess. Charlie and Delta, get your asses up those cliffs. I want overlapping fields of fire from high ground. Use your grappling gear. Make it rain." His Marines, who learnt long ago that Vidic honor was just a beautiful way to die, scattered. Instead of a line, they melted into the landscape. They used grappling lines to scale sheer cliff faces, set up heavy machine gun nests in hidden alcoves, and rigged improvised explosives from their own high-yield power packs in narrow ravines. They became ghosts, striking the Devourer swarm from the flanks and the rear, sowing chaos and confusion. They fought dirty. They fought smart. They were brutally, terrifyingly effective. During a brief lull, as the swarm pulled back to consolidate, Alvarez saw a Vitic Centurion get cut off from the main line, the warrior's shield overloaded, fizzling in a shower of sparks. 3 large mantis-like devourer hunter forms cornered him. The Centurion planted his feet, raised his plasma glaive in a 2-handed salute to the sky, and prepared to meet his honorable end. Just then one hunter form did something strange. Instead of charging blindly, it picked up a large, heavy piece of a fallen Vitic shield and held it before its body, advancing cautiously behind the makeshift cover. Alvarez blinked. A new trick. He sighed. Show off. He slid down a scree-covered rock face, landing beside the astonished Vitic. Without a word, he slapped a magnetic detonator into a discarded, still glowing, Vitic power cell, kicked it like garbage toward the advancing creatures, and grabbed the Centurion's shoulder pauldron. "Fire in the hole, big guy." Alvarez grunted, yanking the massive warrior into the cover of a rocky outcrop just as he hit the trigger. The power cell detonated with the force of a small artillery shell, the overcharged plasma vaporizing the hunter forms in a flash of white-hot energy. The Centurion, alive and deeply shamed by the undignified rescue, stared at the human. Alvarez gave him a casual thumbs up from behind his helmet and slapped him on the back. "Stay frosty," he said, and moved on, already scanning for his next target. A seed of bewildered, grudging respect was planted in the hard, honorable soil of the Centurion's heart. Meanwhile, in high orbit above Cora's chaos, Dr. Naima Kada finally got what she had been begging, screaming and threatening Madsen for. A fresh, reasonably intact Devourer ground organism, snagged by a retrieval drone. Her mobile lab, the repurposed medical frigate Florence, was a whirlwind of activity. Sample trays, dismantled tools, and scribbled on data slates covered every surface, yet Kada moved through it all with purpose. Her 2 Petran observers assigned by the Concord Council watched with a biological revulsion as Kada went to work. She bypassed solemn reverence and attacked the creature with the manic, joyful glee of a master watchmaker presented with a fascinatingly complex new timepiece. "All right, boys, let's see what makes you tick," she muttered, her scalpels and microsaws a blur. Within an hour she made 2 discoveries. The first was immediately useful. The corrosive chemical slurry the Devourers used to dissolve matter was also, she found, a hyperpotent, if dangerously unstable, propellant when catalyzed with a simple electrical charge. The second discovery was more unsettling. Deep within the creature's central biomass, she found dense, complexly bundled nerves clusters. They were dormant, showing an absence of electrical activity. They seemed almost vestigial. An evolutionary puzzle, an unfired gun. She made a note, flagged it as a high-priority anomaly, and then focused on the more immediate prize, a new way to kill things. Before Kada went public, she opened a secure channel to the last argument. Madsen's scarred face appeared on her screen. "Got something for me, Doc?" "More than something," she said, her words tumbling out. "I found a way to turn their own acid against them. A chemical catalyst, electrical charge, big messy boom. We can make improvised launchers, handhelds, ship-mounted cannons. It could change everything on the ground." Madsen was silent for a moment, his eyes distant. "They're learning, Naima. Every trick we pull, they adapt. I saw it in orbit. Alvarez sees it on the ground. If we build one standard-issue weapon, they'll develop a defense for it in a week. Kata grinned, a wild, fierce light in her eyes. Exactly. So we don't give them a standard-issue weapon. We don't give them a playbook. We give them a library, an entire chaotic, contradictory library. I'm putting the basic science in 3 different stupidly simple blueprints on the open comms net. Let the scrappers, the cores, and every grease monkey with a welder build their own version. Let's see the bastards adapt to 1,000 different weapons all at once. Madsen's grim expression broke into a slow, predatory smile. Do it. Kata cut the channel and began her broadcast. Her face, smudged with alien viscera, filled comm feeds across the human fleet. Hey, you beautiful maniacs. Dr. Cater here with a fun new recipe from Hell's Kitchen, she began. Here's the science. Knock yourselves out. Try not to blow yourselves up, or do. I'm a doctor, not your mom. Cater out. The reaction was immediate, chaotic, and profoundly human. Within 48 hours, the battlefield on Korra transformed. The Gorgon Pass, once a solemn line of honorable death, became a hellscape of improvised chemical warfare. The junkyard dogs, armed with goo launchers, painted the canyon walls with incandescent, melting death. The Vitic, bewildered but desperate, began to learn the beauty of a chaotic, dirty, and deeply effective defense. The tide turned. For the first time since the Devourers appeared, victory seemed possible, and with the insane, unpredictable humans, perhaps even inevitable. Then, during a major fleet engagement to liberate Korra's orbit, the Devourer swarm changed. Its adaptation gave way to thought. It executed a perfect pincer maneuvement, a complex feint Madsen himself used to great effect 2 days prior. It used a single, heavily damaged bioship as bait, luring out an aggressive squadron of human destroyers. As the destroyers closed in, the main swarm closed behind them, focusing all its fire on their command and control ship. Simultaneously, the Devourers ruthlessly and instantly exploited a temporary gap in the human battle line. A gap created when 2 rival mercenary groups opened fire on each other over salvage rights. A wave of Devourer fighters poured through the hole, crippling a dozen ships before the gap closed. Madsen, his face a grim tableau of shock, sacrificed one of his best cruisers, the Acheron, to prevent a total collapse of his flank. Swarm's fight became a hunt. A horrified Vanox stood before the holographic projection of the Concord Council. Their adaptive curve has gone vertical, he reported, his voice heavy with dread. Their tactical responses are predictive, beyond simple reaction. They use their own strategies against us. Dr. Kata's hologram appeared beside his. Her usual manic energy replaced by a cold, clinical fear. It's the nerve bundles, she said, her voice strained. The ones I found. They were dormant. They must have activated. The Devourers were a mindless force of nature. Humanity's chaotic, unpredictable, and constantly evolving strategies. We gave them a crash course in warfare. We've been teaching them. The Ovathi representative, Nyala, let out a sound like a terrified bird. Her feathery form trembled violently. They have made the monsters smarter. High strategist, you must close the quarantine gate at once! Seal them in, sacrifice Prixis. We must contain this new, far more intelligent threat before it consumes us all. Too late for that. Madsen's hologram materialized uninvited. In the council chamber's center, he looked haggard, his face streaked with grime, but his eyes burned with a predatory smile. He skipped the denial and embraced the accusation. Good, he snarled, the single word dripping with a satisfaction that horrified the council members. Before it was hurricane. You can't kill a hurricane. Now it's an army. An army has a general. It has a command structure. It has a head. He leaned into the projection, his head sweeping over the council's shocked faces. And we, he said, a dangerous wolfish grin spreading across his face, are going to cut it off. He laid out an insane plan, a single all-or-nothing suicide run. A decapitation strike, he called it, aimed at what he theorized must be a central nexus organism, a queen or command brain coordinating the swarm from a hidden massive bioship deep within their fleet. It was a plan with 1,000 ways to fail and only one razor-thin path to victory. The council was deadlocked. The cold, hard logic of the Great Quieting, the doctrine that governed them for millennium, demanded containment. Sacrifice. Cut your losses, cauterize the wound, let Prixus burn to save the galaxy. Nyala the Ovathi was nearly hysterical, demanding Vanox sever contact with the humans and retreat. But Vanox had seen human madness succeed where Concord logic failed a dozen times over. He remembered the Vitic Centurion on Cora, saved by an improvised bomb, made from garbage. He remembered the battlefield stripped for parts, the brutal, beautiful calculus that turned civilian freighters into weapons of mass destruction. He made his choice. He turned his back on the council hologram, a gesture of profound, unforgettable, unforgivable respect, and faced his comms officer. "Cut the feed to the Concord Council," he commanded, his voice ringing with a finality that echoed across the bridge. "Open a direct fleet-wide channel to the human. Matson, inform him all remaining Vitic assets are now under his tactical command, effective immediately." His action was his declaration. The Great Quieting was over. The combined fleet, a bizarre patchwork armada of elegant Concord warships and brutal, ugly human vessels prepared for the final battle. The mood was a surreal mixture of Vitic solemnity and human manic energy, while Vitic warriors painted honorifics on their armor with deliberate care and performed quiet rituals of battle readiness. Human crews blasted ancient, pounding rock music from their external speakers and placed bets on who would die first. On the Florence, Dr. Cader briefed the assault teams, Alvarez's junkyard dogs foremost among them. She developed a targeted bioagent, a toxin designed to sever the Nexus's hive-mind connection. To guide it, they needed to plant a fragile network of subspace-linked comm repeaters. "Think of it like breadcrumbs," she explained, pointing at a schematic of a twisting organic corridor. "This chain is your only link back to me. I can guide the agent through the network, but if a single link breaks, the chain is broken. You'll be on your own, shouting into the dark, no pressure." Alvarez simply nodded and checked the charge on his plasma rifle. His squad, well, what was left of it, gathered around him. Corporal Jensen, a stoic, silent sharpshooter, and Private Davies, a boisterous heavy weapon specialist, who had painted a grinning skull on his helmet, looked as ready as they would ever be. The battle for the Nexus was a storm of fire, death, and crushing odds. Madsen and Vanox, coordinating the main fleet from the last argument's bridge, acted as the anvil, holding the newly intelligent, tactically brilliant swarm in place. The hammer was a wave of small, fast human ships and armor-boarding pods diving straight into the enemy fleet's maw. They ignored the smaller ships, heading for the coordinates of the suspected Nexus, a bioship the size of a small moon, a pulsating, cancerous growth at the swarm's heart. Inside the Nexus was a living hell. The corridors were pulsing, slick tunnels of living flesh. The air was thick with the stench of superheated proteins and ammonia. Huge artery-like conduits pulsed in the walls. Alvarez and his squad advanced with grim purpose through a nightmare landscape. At every major junction, they planted one of Cader's precious comm repeaters, its small green light a tiny beacon of sanity in the madness. The Nexus fought back, growing creatures instead of just sending them. Biomorphed horrors spawned from the walls in real time, specifically designed to counter their tactics. When they used cover, the walls sprouted grasping tendrils. When they laid down suppressing fire, the emerging creatures had hardened armor. On the comms, Cader's voice was their lifeline. "Okay, seismic shows a large cavity ahead. That's gotta be the primary nerve cluster, but I'm losing the signal from repeater 3. It's gone! The chain is breaking down, you need to hurry!" On the bridge of the last argument, Vanox stood beside Madsen. They were study in contrasts, the towering four-armed warrior in ornate battle armor and the scarred, weary human mercenary in a simple flight suit. They spoke only of firing solutions and energy levels. "The Oathkeeper's shields are failing," Vanox reported, his voice calm. "They are drawing fire from 3 capital-class bioships." "Tell them to hold," Madsen grunted, his eyes fixed on the battle map. "Just a little longer. Alvarez is almost there." He watched a squadron of Vitic fighters fly escort for a battered human bomber, shielding it with their own bodies. He saw a Jovian scrapper ship use its powerful tractor beams to pull a crippled Concord destroyer from the line of fire. They watched the display. two commanders of a single monstrous, beautiful fleet, born of desperation and fire. Alvarez reached the central chamber. It was a vast cavern. In its center pulsed a colossal brain-like mass of bioelectric tissue, crackling with sickening psychic energy. The beast's heart. The walls were lined with massive pulsating biological conduits, each as thick as a transport shuttle. He was down to his last three Marines, Davies, Jensen, and private named Cole. "Cole, Davies, with me on the injector," he ordered. "Jensen, you're on overwatch. Hold this doorway. Nothing gets in, nothing gets out. Understood?" Jensen, her face impassive, nodded once. She knelt, braced her heavy sniper rifle, and laid down a brutally effective field of suppressive fire, her shots punching through the heads of bio-horrors that tried to swarm the chamber. Alvarez and the other two Marines hauled the bioagent injector, a heavy tripod-mounted device, to the base of the pulsing core. As they rigged it, a massive scythe-like tendril of bone and sinew whipped from the ceiling, faster than thought, and impaled Private Cole, pinning him to the far wall. Davies screamed in rage and emptied his magazine into the tendril. Another one flashed from the core, slamming Davies against the injector rig. As Alvarez finally locked the device in place and slammed the activation stud, a third, needle-sharp tendril punched straight through his chest plate, mortally wounding him. He staggered back, feeling the cold numbness spread. With his last breath, he keyed his helmet comm, his voice a bloody wet whisper for one person. "Hey, Jensen. Knock, knock." He slumped against the injector and triggered the remote detonator on his belt. A silent psychic scream erupted from the Nexus, a wave of concentrated agony that caused comms to shriek with static and lights to flicker and die across the entire fleet. The Nexus convulsed, a moon-sized organism having a fatal seizure. The central chamber tore itself apart as the core imploded. The massive biological conduits lining the walls ruptured in a chain reaction. The one directly behind Jensen's position, a primary circulatory vent, burst with catastrophic force. A tidal wave of pressured alien fluid and gas erupted, blasting her and the entire section of wall she was braced against clear into the blackness. The creature's own dying breath threw her from the collapsing superstructure. Across the entire battlefield, the Devourer's swarm went haywire. Its guiding consciousness shattered. The bioships, now just mindless beasts, turned on each other or simply went inert, drifting aimlessly in space. The battle was over. The war was won. On the bridge of the last argument, the quiet that followed the psychic scream broke into a roar of cheers and a blast of triumphant, ancient rock music from the human comm channels. Vanox looked at his battle map. He saw the human fleet, battered, broken, but undeniably victorious. His console highlighted a human corvette, its shields flickering with a distinctively Concorde modulation signature. Then it fired a cleaning burst at a drifting Devourer husk, and the weapon's energy reading was terrifyingly high, a refined version of Kata's goo. A single transmission, shaky and filled with a damaged suit static and survival raw adrenaline, cut through the noise. It was Jensen, tumbling through the debris field, her laughter a raw, grief-stricken but utterly triumphant sound echoing in the sudden quiet that fell over the comms. "Don't worry," she gasped between laughs. "We'll fight the next war too, even if it's with you." Her transmission cut out, replaced by a momentary, stunned silence across every comm channel. Then the human frequencies exploded in a cacophony of triumphant noise. It was 1,000 different anthems of ancient rock music, whoops of joy, and the loud, crass arguments of scavengers already claiming salvage rights over open comm channels.